Hey, sir, I'd like to run a test. Maybe get a 17% uplift. 17%? I need 300%. It doesn't work. You got to get people to come together and fight this battle with you.
What is going on, certified homies? Welcome to another episode of From A to B. You have Shiva, and I'm joined by Nima the Machine Yassini, who is a co-founder of New Republic, which got acquired by Deloitte. No big deal. And he's also a super senior experimentation consultant. I was first turned on to you with some of the long form posts that you've been writing. It's so clear to me that you have such an eye towards high quality experimentation, but you have a lot of topics around leadership. So that's why I wanted to have you on to kind of help us junior CROs and mid-level CROs, let's say, tame the hippo or talk to leadership so we get more buy-in to experimentation. So anyway, Nima, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I've been a long-time listener, first-time caller. So this is quite exciting for me.
First-time caller. That's awesome. Cool. Okay, doke. So the topic for today is effectively your leadership doesn't care about experimentation. And we want to talk about that. Potentially, why don't they give a shit about experimentation, and then how to address it. Let me paint a quick scenario here. You're at a company, you are the senior CRO person. You're in charge of A/B testing, you're in charge of consolidating with research and bridging that gap. And every time it goes to run a test, leadership's just like, nah, we can't do this, it's too slow. We don't have to test it. I already know this is gonna work. That's the scenario that many CROs face, unfortunately. Let's start with this question here first, Nima. If you had to put yourself in the mindset of a leader, what would be some reasons why that leader would be so adverse to experimentation, to be like, I don't want to run a test. I don't care about testing. I don't care about research. Like, put yourself in the mind. What are some common excuses you've heard?
I think the first thing you got to tackle is, who is the leader? You know, when you're a junior or midway, your boss is the leader. In most cases, they're not the people who are not in agreement. It's usually the people above them. And a lot of the times we don't actually know who we need to influence and what are the things that impact them and their decisions. There's still a lot of leaders out there who's looking for the silver bullet. So they're looking for one change that generates a massive amount of impact to the business. And, and they really love the rhetoric that the SaaS companies come in and saying, you could do this and you'll generate X billions of dollars. And, I've now been on the inside of consulting firms and the numbers that they promise. And there's no way a personalization program can deliver that when you're doing an A/B test within, they're like, experimentation is wrapped up in A/B, in personalization. There's no way you're going to hit those numbers. And so what they're looking for is high impact. But the problem with experimentation is it's a cumulative program. It's not a high impact program. It never is. I find one of the biggest challenges with leadership is the language that we use in experimentation. It doesn't really resonate because they're looking for the big impact, the big game changer shift. And those things are hard to find in our game. It's really hard to find. That's the first one. And the second one, I feel like people don't know who they're influencing or who they need to get on board and what drives those people, both politically and personally. And as a result, they're basically talking about program activities that matters to them, but it just doesn't matter to the person, not the person in charge, but the person in charge of the person in charge, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it seems like the challenge here with some CROs is that they are talking too tactical and not big picture around, hey, we have to run this button color test. Hey, we have to do this A/B test on this filter in the ecom page.
No one gives a shit. No one cares about the button color. I don't know, in a senior executive or board meeting that I've sat in, they're like, that red is just not red enough. Or that red is too striking. We should make it no one cares about those things. And that's the problem is the language of the program is very different to the language of the business. And seldom does junior CROs know how to understand the language of the business. And a lot of them are self-taught. And so they come into it getting excited about stuff they've seen, but they don't know how to translate that back into what impacts a business and what shifts the dial for the senior executive team. Shiva, one really important thing, change is a really scary thought. So if you have a company who doesn't embrace a culture of change, and we talk about a culture of experimentation. Really what you're talking about is a culture of change. If you haven't got an organization that's embracing a culture of change, going in and talking about testing and continuous change, it sounds risky. It actually sounds like you're going to get demoted. A lot of people will resist the idea of failure to learn because, imagine going to a boss and say, we just lost $500,000 there on that test, but we've learned this thing. And they're like, dude, you just lost $500,000. That's my bonus gone. Sometimes it's language. Sometimes it's the culture within the individual and the organization. And a lot of times you're talking in different ways.
So on that point, you were bringing up the change aspect, and you're saying sometimes some leadership might not just want to run a test because it has a potential to lose when status quo won't lose in their minds. There's probably some folks where if you convince them, hey, a loss just means we learned something and it's something that we will take as a learning for the next test and keep it moving forward. Yeah, like you think about stock markets, right? If you look at a stock market daily, you might see like minus 20% and you might just see it keep on going down, down, down. But at a certain point, you're looking at yearly growth. If you're looking at the stock market on a daily basis, you're probably like a super stock trader and you're trading on I don't know anything about stocks. But like you should be looking at the macro level goals. And I guess that's where we break into like you have the opportunity to present these as learnings and talk about how you have next tests queued up as a result of this loss that have a high opportunity to win because of that learning that you generated. But what's not in your control is that leadership being like, I don't want to run a test.
Shiv, sorry, you got to excuse me this. Where are you working at the moment? The company you're with now?
Motive. It's like a fleet, B2B fleet company, yeah.
I guarantee if I walked into there and I said, I've got this great new technology with artificial intelligence, not only would I get a meeting, they would be like, where do we sign? What do we need to do? I mean, of course, they'll ask the logical questions around operational efficiencies, but I find a lot of the people who go into these conversations go on their own. And this is the biggest mistake that I've noticed is and this is really sad, but it's true and no one talks about it. And I want to put it on the table is when you get hired, people don't respect your opinion as much as a consultant who comes in and says the exact same thing as you. I have no fucking idea why that's the way, but it is the damn truth. They'll pay your salary and then they'll pay that times 10 for the consultant to say exactly what you said, just different words and acronyms. And then the SaaS company will come in and say the same thing. And this is the problem I've got with juniors and people trying to create this, getting the seniors on board is seniors need a number of people to say the same thing. They need their world to be drowning in SaaS companies, consultants, employees, all saying the same thing for them to go, maybe there's something in this and we should do this. You know what I mean? And that's why artificial intelligence, I was like, yes, it's going to change the world, but fundamentally everyone is saying it. And that's the problem is in experimentation, we kind of, little me, hey, Sarah, I'd like to run a test. Maybe get a 17% uplift. And the guy's like, 17%, I need 300%. It doesn't work. You got to get people to come together and fight this battle with you.
I'm not sure why Mickey Mouse is doing A/B testing, but I am here for it. I am here for diversity. Okay, I have so many threads in my head because one, you could not have triggered me any more than that comment around consultants having higher trust. It's so fucking stupid, but you're so right. The same person with the same amount of experience, in fact, less experience. It's like because I have a podcast, I'm more trustworthy. I'm not more trustworthy because I have a podcast. I just bought a mic.
It's the truth. Call yourself a consultant and walk into a meeting and I guarantee you they'll be like, and I've said it to people, I'm like, bring me in. You don't need to work with me. Just bring me in. Let me just say the exact same thing as you. I guarantee you'll have a different conversation when I'm late. Bring in an optimized lead. Bring in web trends. Just bring them in. Bring them in. Don't fight this battle on your own. And they're like, I can't get them to listen. Of course you can't because they don't believe you. For some reason, they pay you and they give you a job, but they don't believe you. They seem to believe everyone else out there.
I want to go deeper into that. Can you help me understand potentially why? Because this blows my mind. I think you've nailed it. It's so weird that you hire a senior person to come in and do a job, and then when it comes to actually trusting them, in so many cases they don't. But they do trust these external resources. Like they'll read a blog article about a test that they have to do because fucking Booking did it. Sorry, no shade thrown at Booking. You guys are great. I just mean like, just because one company does it doesn't mean you should do it. But like, why? Why is that the case that they hire you, but they don't trust you?
I don't know if it's, I use the word trust. I don't know if the right word is trust. I think there's safety inconsistency in hearing the same message over and over again. There's something to be said. The consultancies are known to consult the senior executives, and they know the language of the senior executives. They understand. I myself don't understand it, but I do see it happening all the time. I will go in and present the ideology of experimentation, the ideology of change, and the programs of change and culture and all those kinds of things. And people will love the rhetoric. It will be consistent to what their team is saying to them. And so for some reason, they get excited and they want to do something. And I go back to it. The challenge I think experimentation practitioners face is they take up the challenge on their own. They fight in isolation. And this is a war. It's not a battle. You'll never win the war if you can't be strategic in how you fight the battle. You need third parties. I've told people, bring Optimizely in. They're like, yeah, but they're going to try and sell us the tech. We're with Adobe. I'm like, it doesn't matter. They'll just keep sending them information and articles. And I don't want to waste Optimizely's time or anything, but ideally you need a group of people to change the way someone thinks. You can't just do it on your own. And I don't know why people do this. I see it over and over again. I don't have the answer. All I can say is I've learned that the language to executives is multiple people working together unanimously.
Okay, I love that. So you have to enlist the help of cross-functional folks who are all banging the same drum, saying the same message to get that buy-in across the teams. If it's just that, you're right, if it's just that one Mickey Mouse CRO who's like, yeah, run the test, they're going to be like, cool, I'm not going to do that. But if you have then the whole engineering team saying the same thing.
100%. They're not going to say, hey, don't do testing. They're like, hey, that's great. But you'll never bust it out of just being a siloed program run by a small team that's never really funded by the business. It's always this little thing that you run. If you want to expand it, you've got to start thinking about this as a journey, and you've got to start enlisting. The one thing I tell people every time they come to me with their problems around exactly this, I say to them, get people like myself. Even if it's not me, I can give you a list of people, get them to come in and do lunch and learns. Get Shiva to come in and talk about the mind-blowing experiments they've done. Talk about the different types of experiments. Talk about how experimentation is not about conversion. It's also about things like operational efficiencies, financial, price plays, so forth, right? So think about range. If you can create an atmosphere where all they ever hear is experimentation, that film with, who's the guy who plays Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? Just Will Smith. Remember he did this film where he was loading the guy's mind with messages without him knowing. And then all of a sudden he would place the bet that Will Smith wanted him to bet, but he'd send signals and cues throughout the room that made the guy think that individual, I forgot what it was called. It was like
Focus or something
like that, right? And all he did was send signals throughout the room. Like guy would wear a watch, or some guy was wearing a dolphin's hat. And this guy would say these implicit signals that would make him, his cognitive biases would start to kick in and make him, it's the same thing. You got to play that game if you really want the executive team to buy in. They need to be drowning in the story, kind of like what artificial intelligence, if you roll back 5 years, it was personalization. All the SaaS companies were talking personalization. The media was talking personalization. Categories like e-commerce were talking, and organizations that were doing, next best product, they all of a sudden start talking about personalized product recommendation. As soon as you drown the executive in these terms or in this kind of world, all of a sudden it becomes an interesting thing to look at.
To take a step back, you're saying these are a couple tactics to effectively help get cross-functional alignment. I just saw Inception, and that's clear in my mind of you sow the seeds of testing. So every time you see the CEO in the cafeteria, just keep on repeating the word testing and just keep on saying the word test.
or even hint to it. I tried this one, but the taste buds just failed. But this one I had a really positive outcome on this one. So you should try this cake.
And just keep on saying statistical significance and keep on using all the buzzwords.
100%.
But this goal, right, is ultimately to get that person thinking more about testing. We're joking about subliminally say it, but really it's just keep the conversation focused on testing, experimentation, keep it top of mind. And that's not just with layers up. When you go cross-functionally with lunch and learns, you keep on talking to them about the value of experimentation. These are some tactical things that do truly help build that culture of, I guess it breaks the culture of change, It breaks the culture of lack of change, and it helps get people more interested in that A/B testing.
People become really focused on their day job. The number of product teams that I see, like, why do we need A/B testing or why do we need to do experimentation? We talk to customers. We know what our customers want.
Oh God, don't get me started on that.
But, I started talking about quantitative research. A/B testing is a quantitative research method. It's not about conversion. You have qualitative through your, research groups that you have. And then all I'm doing is showing you the impact if I show it to a large quantity of people, which you couldn't do practically. And I can in a short period of time. So I can actually take your qual and quantify its impact. So we now know the business return we could get and getting other people to tell those stories. And that's what it's about. We talk about a culture of experimentation, but the greatest missing element within cultures of experimentation is people who understand how to formulate cultures. And cultures are built from rituals, habits, events that we practice on a regular basis connected to an identity. So we all look the same. When we talk about nationalism is connected to a flag. It's a belief system, right? And then underneath that, we have our rituals. Australians, we have Australia Day. We have different rituals that makes us Australian. It's no different. Cultures of experimentation or creating culture is not about running tests. It's not about showing impacts of tests. It's not about showing learnings. It's about habits, rituals, and identity. If you don't land those three, forget it, dude. All you're doing is running tests, and that's not interesting. But creating a habit and rituals and a way of like showing up and going, I'm like those people, that's what people resonate to. The thing that happens after that is A/B testing. But if you don't land those habits, rituals, and ways of showing up, you're never going to get there.
I want to make sure I distinguish that culture of experimentation from conducting those individual A/B tests. Like, it's also okay and you can create impact without a true top level tier culture of experimentation. Just because you don't have a culture of experimentation doesn't mean don't run A/B tests, because you could still generate value and be impactful.
100%. I guess what I'm saying is don't just look at it as, because a lot of times, Shiva, every time I read about or I see people talking about experiments and showing people the test results and stuff, but they don't talk about how you formulate culture. And that's one thing we don't talk about in this category. We don't talk about culture, actually, how a culture is formed, how a group of people come together. I read Atomic Habits and I was like, wow, this is amazing. How do you adapt the way you create a habit into how people come together and practice the ritual activities of experimentation to a wider audience inside the organization? That's really interesting to me. I think that's something that we miss within this category. We don't talk about it enough.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're saying when we talk about culture of experimentation, too many people focus on experimentation and not on culture piece, which is 50% of the phrase.
That's exactly right. I haven't seen a lot around culture change, culture adaptation, how to bring people into new cultures, how to manage fear of culture change, all those things. And also large organizations. Now, booking started being an experimentation business. But if you're like, I don't know, let's pick a really old school business like a Caltex or something like that. And how do you bring experimentation or culture change into a very established organization where things are done the way they're done and they don't break those, because the repercussions of getting it wrong could be massive. So it becomes really challenging. And if you don't talk about culture and experimentation, it becomes really difficult. We focus on the experiment, but we don't focus on culture.
I don't know Booking.com intimately enough to know how they progress towards that true culture of experimentation. But I have to believe it started with a culture of data-driven decision-making. To your point, they built that culture and then they matured to a point of experimentation as a methodology of advanced data-driven decision-making.
But not a lot of people start that way, Ship. Like, I've seen a lot of organizations where experimentation is the adjunct step into data. We sell experimentation as a way of making data-led decisions. And we talk about fast data rather than slow data. Like, GA to me is slow data. You got to collect the data, then someone's got to pull the data, cut it up, analyze it, ask questions against it, represent that. That shit could take 3 months, right? Whereas an experiment could be done in 2 weeks, and you've got a bit of a pivot point to go, well, what does this tell us? Which way do we need to run another experiment, or can we action, right? There's a lot of organizations out there and a lot of fantastic practitioners that go into very established old organizations of, well, we've always done this way. They don't have a deep thought process of data. Experimentation is a starting point to that. And so those guys really need to play a dual sword. One is run experiments that shows the impacts it can have. But the other side is, how do you change culture? Shiv, I challenge you. Tell me where I can go and learn about culture change within our category. Because there's not a lot of people sitting there going, here's how you change the category. Here's how you change the culture. It's what the actions you need to take. It's not out there. It's not many out there talking about it.
Part of the challenge that I see with that is just it is so nuanced and contextual to the organization that you're working at, which is why, like, I know we're almost kind of going full circle of like, actually consulting might actually be worthwhile here, where consultation around like, okay, someone from the outside can actually have an audit of everything happening, and that's where it might be valuable.
I mean, the guys at Spirit do a wonderful job. And there's some great guys out there, like Andre at Conversions Craft, like, they're amazing at what they do. Like, and you look at Conversionista that merged with a consulting firm, they're and I know when conversations I had with those guys, they look at experimentation from a longer journey. Like, hey, listen, we can increase your order values or we can increase the number of orders, but you've got a problem with delivery. So if I can increase your orders, you're not going to be able to fulfill. So we need to go run experiment. So they are fundamentally looking at the picture much more holistically. Going back to what you said, as a junior CRO, I would say to you, don't just focus on experiments and impacts of experiments. Focus on not only the culture side of culture of experimentation, you need to get into that side as well. You need to research that and go, how do I help shift this way of thinking that the organization has? And who are the people? What are the rituals? What are the behaviors? And how do I get them to want to be a part of this and show up for this? I think that is a critical part to the journey that they're taking.
You talked very early on in this episode around leadership is looking for high impact. So I had Slobodan to talk about Snakeoil and CRO. And one of those things is a lot of CRO agencies, quote unquote, CRO agencies, talking about, we'll lift your conversion rate by 400%. Like, I got this cold email from someone who I just laughed at this. They're like, hey, we looked at your website and there's an opportunity for you to improve your conversion rate by 70%. And I just like laughed and I sent them the Ron Swanson meme of like, I know more than you. Like, it's so stupid because there's no way of being able to quantify that. But to that point, leadership is looking for high impact. And if you're a CRO coming in, you're like, I don't know what tests will win or lose. That's why we run tests. But I know that I can run a process of good hygiene and good data-driven marketing, and we will generate positive results. In a net, what those numbers look like, I'm not sure, but we'll follow the best process we possibly can. But to that point, leadership probably sees the email from this cold call and they're like, hey, 70% lift to conversion rate, go talk to them. They're great. And that's where, like, again, that consultant layer plus the numbers and the impacts, it's bullshit. These numbers are all bullshit. But when leaders are looking for impact, they see that. And I think that's where it gravitates towards the hackiness. So it's an interesting conversation around leadership looking for these high impacts. So I guess, do you have any thoughts on how CROs can improve their messaging to sell more of the CRO to a person who is looking for that high impact testing? Because part of me feels uncomfortable saying like, oh, I'll run a test and it's going to win and it's going to have 70% lift. Like,
look, I think the biggest challenge with the category is we've typecasted ourselves into conversion and revenue. And I honestly think it's a dangerous game that we play. Like it is when you talk about sales and sales results, in a number of occasions, there are so many variables that impact sales that are outside the person who's optimizing the experience. Like it's completely outside price, availability, stock. I mean, there's so much stuff, right? And different categories will have different issues, right? Dude, when we first started out, we didn't know much. We were doing the same thing. Like we can lift your salary. And then we slowly realized like, you can't fucking do that. That's bullshit. Like we've got to stop saying that stuff. And then I realized like the conversation of conversion is a very narrow view and it's not good for our category. And I think we need to think about it broader. Like I started getting more and more into, we are a research company. We understand what customers truly want. A happy customer buys. Everybody wants to buy something. Like, no offense. Look at your room. It's full of shit that you enjoy, right? You wanted to buy it. No one forced you to buy that jersey, or I think that's is that Arnold Schwarzenegger in the background in Terminator, right? You enjoy those things. You want to buy those things. Okay. Fundamentally, people want to buy from people who they trust, who they like, or they like the product. So fundamentally, it's a quantitative research tool. And that's where we started shifting the conversation, was away from revenue, was away from trying to help you increase sales or competing with the next person who tried to say that they do. And we started talking about, let's understand our customer. This is a quantitative research tool that we can adapt to anything, whether it's, price elasticity, whether it's operational, whether it's big decision making around, hey, we've got to an app and we want to get people to apply for the product through the app versus a form, what's the revenue impact on our P&L if we did that? So looking at it broader than just a conversion conversation, I honestly think and I believe Optimizely popularized the word conversion rate optimization to get marketers to pay attention to A/B testing, because A/B testing isn't sexy, but talking about sales uplift was dangerous. And I think it typecasted the category, and anyone who calls themselves CRO is always going to have that battle of revenue. And there's always things that you can do that's always going to trump an experiment in revenue impact. That's the challenge, is you're always trying to beat somebody else. Whereas when you're a customer experience specialist, when you're a quantitative research specialist, it's different. You're coming at the problem in a different way. You're talking to people in a different way. The mindset of decision making is different because it's about understanding our customers more than it is about revenue.
So I think everything you're saying is correct. And there's bonus points in repositioning CRO as research, because then it's an investment. I talked to Kelly about this a couple episodes ago. It's the investment into research where it's like, how many dollars did you make after graduating college? Well, no, I've lost a lot of money, but I've learned, and now I'm going to go out and make the money. I'm going to do the things I need to do to pay back the loans or whatever. That's where it's treated as an investment into research versus, okay, how much money did this test win? I think the flip side of that is, do you get as much interest in the industry if you sell yourself as research? Because it can be a boring thing to some people versus A/B testing or a CRO is more of a sexy appeal. To add more layers to this, if someone hires you on as a CRO, that leader might be expecting you to literally run winning tests and generate them dollars. So in a perfect world, you don't have that. In a perfect world, you're hired as a research. I think in the real world, we're living by our sword. Now we're kind of dying by it with the naming. Some, if not many people, are hired into this position where you are tasked with running winning tests. If you're that junior CRO and you run into leadership that might not understand it, what do you do besides quit?
I love that. running winning tests. That's just such a paradox, right? Because
I have an aside for that. One time I talked to a leader and they're like, I want to make sure we only run winning tests. I don't want to run any losing tests. So I'm like, oh, cool. I'll just pull out my crystal ball and then we'll just only run the winning tests. In fact, we don't even run the tests. We'll just only do the winning things. Pay me $2 billion. It's so stupid.
It technically, that's called production. There's no such, you produce what wins, right? You send it live. So there's no such thing as running a winning test. Look, can I say one thing, man? I think words really matter. I'm old enough to know this, that once upon a time, we used to talk about the ozone layer, global warming, right? And no one really paid attention. And then we started talking about climate change and people started recycling and people point to the ozone layer and people are much more aware of the changes in our weather patterns, right? I think words matter. And I think going back to the reason of this conversation was empowering junior CROs to be able to have more elevated conversations. I also think you need to consider words matter. The word that you use with different leaders will resonate differently. You'll have certain leaders who are very sales orientated, even CEOs. There are CEOs for organizations that are sales orientated CEOs. They bring in a CEO who knows how to drive sales and revenue for an organization. There are CEOs who are very good at operational. They know how to maintain the status quo, keep the business running. There are CEOs that are really good with consolidating, getting rid of costs and creating operational efficiencies. Different CEOs will come in and SaaS companies are renowned for this. They'll bring in a CEO to help list the company. And as soon as it's listed, they bugger off and they bring in another CEO, right? It's no different. You got to find the right words because the outcome is what's important. How you get there isn't. So you got to find the right language for the different leaders. Some leaders value insights and research before they act. Some leaders value sales more than research. So you just got to figure out who you're talking to and what's the right language. Once you've started down that journey, if you start down the journey of research, guys, you're in a much better place. But if you start down the journey of sales, your next task is to start to get them to change their language from revenue orientation to research and insights orientation. Those words matter, and how you then start your journey off the back of that is dependent on how you started your journey. But the more you can move people towards research as a methodology of why we're running an experiment, the more safe you're going to be as an entity and the more able you are to service more people within the organization.
I want to add to that. So I love this idea of yes, obviously your messaging matters. It can be a very powerful tool if leadership is looking for high impact tests or just they're looking for high impact, not just tests. They're just looking for high impact as a whole, right? They'll gravitate towards the hacks because it promises the impact without necessarily following the right process. And I think my analogy that I always use is, would you rather like take a multivitamin, or would you rather get blood work unique to you and figure out exactly the vitamins that you need and follow the proper medical process that might be more expensive, is more catered to you, versus you take a multivitamin and you're peeing out 90% of the shit that you ingest because your body doesn't need 90% of it, and it's just overpriced piss. So like, that's where I think the messaging can be important, that perhaps if the leadership is like, I don't want to test, I just want to do these hacks, I just want to do this, I want to do that, you talk to them and message it as more like, these are hacks, and maybe try your best to debunk those hacks, but then also focus on this process that does work, highlight the outcomes. But maybe that's the messaging that you could help sell with leadership of, don't take the gas station diet pills, go to the gym and exercise, you know?
Yeah, Shiv, I know you read the articles, and originally you said that. I don't know if you ever noticed, I talk about the 3 peaks of experimentation, the political peak, the operational peak, and then the democratization peak. And it's really poignant to what you're saying, because a lot of times when people start an experimentation program, or they think they're in the operational peak, which is all about getting cadence and velocity of program. But what they haven't done is they haven't got buy-in. And so they all of a sudden hit this brick wall where the executive team is, you've got to know what peak you're in to know what actions and activities you're driving at that moment. My favorite, and I mean, I got lucky for this, but I had a QSR, large QSR, international, also in Australia. And the local CEO told me 5 of his absolute truths for how his customers buy his product, predominantly online, right? I tested all 5. 2 of them were right. 3 of them were wrong. I then just said to him afterwards, it was in a dinner, and I said, how many other decisions are you making every day with those truths that are absolutely false when you test them? And from that point, everything became an experiment for him. And so I think a lot of the times it's understanding who you're selling, knowing that what peak you're in, knowing who you're selling, getting them involved or getting their language into your program and understanding how to sell them. And then once you've got past that stage gate, then start focusing on running some seriously good experiments.
I know we talked about this a little bit earlier in the episode too. It's worth evaluating your landscape of stakeholders, because there's probably going to be some stakeholders who love experimentation. They're like, test it, I love it, what can I do to help?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Identify your choke points. Like, who is the person who's really fighting you on this test, or what's the team? And really hone in on that. And that's what you did. You found that stakeholder, you talked to them about their mindset, you got into their mindset, and you, I don't want to say inceptionize them. Actually, you kind of did inceptionize them, right? You figured out kind of what makes them tick, tried out their stuff to validate or invalidate what they're thinking. And I think that's a powerful way to talk the leadership game, is understand what makes them tick, understand the things that they're interested in, and test that. Because if you test the shit that they're interested in and then you prove them right with data, they're your best friend, right?
100%. And you prove them wrong, you're still their best friend, because they now know they've got a trusted source. Well, I found, like, when you prove them wrong, depending on how you present that data, like if you put them in a public forum and embarrass the shit out of them, of course they're going to hate. But if you bring that data to them, all of a sudden they've got a trusted source that they can bring ideas to and know that they can get data quickly to help them make better decisions. There isn't a single person that doesn't want data to make a decision. It's whether that, and this comes down to the individual, whether collecting that data will take time, whether that data will royally impact a bigger plan that they have, that they might not want to dysfunction, or whether they think they publicly will be embarrassed by the outcome of that. The individual running the test needs to decide that. But I just find you don't lose running a program. It's just finding the language of the individual you're trying to sell, because that's what you're doing when you start these things. You're selling the program. You're selling what it can do. Hey, Shiv, I got to tell you this. My daughter, who is 3, won't listen to me, but she's about to climb, and she's about to, and 3, 2, 1. Hey, baby, how you doing? Hey, listen, daddy needs to do this call.
A few moments later.
All right, we're back. It looks like Nima's daughter, the hippo, was very interested in interrupting and giving her thoughts on the podcast. So
that's my leadership right there.
We'll go ahead and wrap this section with some tactical things on what you could do to address the leadership challenge. So I think think my big takeaways out of this is messaging is super important. Make sure as much as you could align quote unquote CRO with it being research focused, that will help you not be so focused in on the dollar amount towards tests, which can be helpful in getting buy-in. Make sure you talk to the folks that are adjacent, get that cross-functional alignment, get more folks talking about experimentation, because the more it's talked about, the more it's in the dialogue, the conversation, the more likelihood that it will be considered, the more buy-in people will have towards it. Do lunch and learn, stuff like that. I think also look at your landscape of stakeholders, figure out who are the choke points and try and talk to them as a human, try and understand what makes them tick. And as much as you can translate some of the tactical things you're talking about, like leadership don't give a fuck about p-values. I can assume most don't, at least. Some might want to nerd out, but most don't give a fuck about p-values. They probably don't even care about the individual tests. They want to see the impact. They care about high impact. So as much as you could focus the messaging and the conversation around the impact that your experimentation program's having, and if they want to nerd out later, you have that opportunity, you document the shit out of it, but focus on impact. Don't focus on, we ran a test. I think those are the takeaways for talking with leadership. Anything else you would add to that as write this down?
No, I think you nailed it. I think you got it.
Cool. Okay, doke. All right, Nima, what is it time for?
It's time for shit you need to know.
Let's go, baby. Okay, doke. So shit you need to know this week comes courtesy of Michal Eisik. I am pretty sure I pronounced your name properly, Michal, or if I didn't pronounce your name, I'm so sorry. So her post that really stood out to me was around B2B landing pages and the dichotomy of many B2B landing pages. I'll summarize it by basically saying some B2B landing pages are basically just blog posts of content without any actual conversion actions or next steps. And then others are literally sign up right now, do it, you coward. Why aren't you signing up yet? Sign up now with an exit intent that says, hey, do you want to sign up? This is her post. She says, some lean too much on direct response, i.e. hard sell. They're very aggressive. Others look and read like blog posts. Are you trying to sell me something? So her advice is a happy medium. Have things like social proof, authority, likability. But I'm curious on your thoughts on this because I agree 100%. And in fact, I think most of the landing pages I see are like literally above the fold, convert, and like that's it. They just want you to convert immediately. And it's like, well, the same thing of going on like a date with someone. If you're trying to close in the like literally 30 seconds of meeting that person, probably not going to be successful unless your product is that good, which most aren't. I'm curious your thoughts on this. Do you think there's that dichotomy of too much in both sides where we need to be in the middle?
I think I would agree and meet in the middle. My only addition would be having worked with B2B. Seldom is the person, depending on the size of the organization you're selling to, but seldom is the person who is buying the same person who's doing the research. The person doing the research probably wants to find a list of providers, and then the person making the decision probably wants more information to be confident in decision making. So I think having a balance of both is absolutely right, but allowing for the fact that one needs different types of information to the other would be my only addition, but I think nailed it.
I love that. I love the dichotomy of the buyer versus the researcher, and that's worth its own intent, especially like you said in B2B, right? It's probably true with B2C, to be honest, in a certain extent. Like
Probably.
Especially for like expensive things, like, I don't know, you're buying a cruise or something. I keep on going back to the cruise example, but it could be like a water heater where it's a joint decision because it's like, I don't like a lot of money, right? Versus,
Yeah,
I don't know,
100%.
I'm just on Amazon trying to buy socks. I am the buyer and the researcher.
And it's his, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So different products, different size, different decision making process. But I think, yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious if you think there's any, like, do you think that the researcher is more inclined to want to be catered towards that, like the learning, the blog post versus the buyer is more catered towards hard sell? Or is it a mix of both?
I don't know about you, shit, but I love money. Not like I love money, like I want it.
Here's a spicy take. Nima loves money.
I know, right? No. But have you noticed when in banking, like I love the banking category because it deals with money, and like every human emotion is loaded into money. Fear, power, success, you name it. Every human emotion can be found when you talk about money, right? And so what I find is the closer you are to the transaction point, the more emotive and emotional decision-making is, and the more people want security in that decision-making, more information, more trust, more points of reference that other people have used them. And the further away you are from that money making, the more scanned and the more simple and the more quick task action they want to take. So and again, that depends on the product. Like you said, the size of the purchase, the type of product it is. As you get closer to the transaction, people just want more security. And the further you're away from the transaction, like research, it's just scanning and going, yeah, I reckon you could fulfill my needs, but I'm not ready to buy. So I feel safe. I can just progress to the next step. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Money's an interesting one, especially when you consider some of the legal aspects within money related things. I was talking to my buddy who is in like insurance selling. I'll just make it super generic, like health insurance. And on so many accounts, their experience sucks big time. Like health insurance in America is just broken and it's so stupid. Nothing makes sense. Like I still don't know what a deductible is. I do, but like it makes no sense. The math doesn't math up half the time. Like the user experience in insurance has so many legal barriers that customer experience always is a secondary compared to the primary of the legal aspect. And money is almost related to that. I'm sure B2B has some of those challenges as well, but
100%. I know when I worked on, I've worked on health insurance, I've worked on banking, and there are points within the journey where you have to add friction because you want the customer to slow down and understand their obligations with the product they're taking. So you are going out of their way to annoy the customer by putting up pop-ups and putting checks in and all that kind of stuff. It's a really interesting category to be playing in. But again, going back to it from a B2B perspective, when you get the buyer coming in to actually transact, I find it's a slightly different type of experience that they need versus the person looking for the information.
Yeah. I love that. I love that additional layer. And it always comes back to research your customers, research your audience, understand your buyers, understand your researchers. There's no global rules.
See what I mean, Shiv? We're research. That's what we do. We are a research group. We're not about conversions. We're about understanding the customer. Conversions is an outcome.
Yeah, but this is nerds talking to nerds. If I told my boss's boss's boss that all I do is research, he'd be like, "Why the fuck did I hire you? I hired you to print money." So you gotta be where you gotta meet people where you're at,
Yeah, fair. I hear you.
It's a stupid world that we live in, and I don't want to end on this super depressing note of just like it all sucks. Just make sure you're making the company money and do all the ROI calculations and stuff. But
that's right.
Yeah. Anyway. All right, fuck it. We'll just end on this shitty note. Nima, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Anything you want to plug besides your awesome LinkedIn posts or your page, which has really great LinkedIn articles that I'll make sure I promote a couple of those.
Thank you, dude. Like you, I have a love affair for the category. So if people need help or just need advice, and like I said, use the community to help you. Like, Shiv, if someone said, I'm having real challenges and I'd love if you come do a lunch and learn, I'm 99% sure you'd say yes. It's the same. Like if there's any way I could help someone get their program up and running with lunch and learn or whatever it might be, just reach out and ask. There's heaps of great assets and people out there who are willing to help.
And full circle, you're a consultant, so you are automatically smarter than anyone who is in-house, according to our rule.
Exactly.
Awesome. Nima, thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure, mate. Thanks for the time.